On today's Rise Report, we're going to be diving into the world of politics. I am joined by 2024 Republican presidential candidate Patrick L. Riley. I had a viewer suggest that I interview Patrick, and today we're going to learn more about him and his run for president of the United States of America. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on today's Rice Report, I am joined by a 2024 Republican presidential candidate. Today, I am joined by Patrick L. Riley. Not only is he going to be running for president as a Republican in 2024, he's also the CEO of Reaper Financial. He's a chairman of the BLOC Oversight Committee, and he happens to be a soldier, maybe ex-soldier, husband, father, American. Welcome to the show, Patrick. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Rice. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank you for accepting, and I want to shout out one of my private members from my website, Tiara. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Tiara, but thank you for the introduction and for making this happen, the suggestion and everything. Actually, Patrick, you are the fourth individual that I've had on the show that's running for president. I've had for the 2020 election, I had John McAfee, I had Adam Kokesh. They ended up teaming up, and I had them on together. And I had Brock Pierce on, who was, I believe, running as, I think, independent. It could have been Republican. And I've had some people running for Congress and Senate. So for people who might be unfamiliar with you, do you mind, and even myself, because I don't really know a whole lot about you aside from what I've mentioned, do you mind introducing yourself to the audience, and then we can get into why you decided to run for president?
Sure. So in many ways, I'm a very normal American. I grew up as the youngest of 5 siblings in a home that was very troubled. Parents were split, and by 12 years old, I actually became homeless until I joined the Army at 17. From 17 through late 2022, I was in the Army as a combat medic, so I was enlisted the whole time. I don't come from a political family or a privileged silver spoon background at all. So I'm here really as an American soldier who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And my duty in that regard is not done. I think there is a significant threat to our nation, and that threat is within our walls. So on that note, I've decided I have no choice but to continue down this path and run for president.
Okay, very cool, man. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate what you're attempting to try to do. You said something that really kind of struck me, because a lot of people that are in the military, in law enforcement, sheriffs, anything like in a government capacity, they're having to make an oath to the Constitution, but I don't think that means the same thing to everybody. What does that oath mean to you?
It truly means that I have to give my life or die trying to save this country should it need it. And an oath to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, is not just those foreign enemies that our government tells us happen to be our enemies, like right now what we see going on with Russia. But it's also those people within our walls, within our Senate, within our House of Representatives, and currently our so-called POTUS, who are acting against the will and against the better interests of the American people.
Okay. I dig it. I like that. And I mean, I respect it, because I really feel like we're in a position with our nation where it seems like the Constitution, the meaning of it, what is written in it is eroding piece by piece. They're trying to take away bits and pieces of it. As just a little tangent, years ago, I sang in bands, and I was very much a proponent of the First Amendment. And I had a job working customer service and ultimately in the political division of the National Rifle Association. And I'm not one to own firearms, but I was one to be supportive of the right to own firearms and the right to form militias, which is what the intent for me was, or that I understand with the Second Amendment. So you have to support them all equally, because if, for example, they're able to take away the Second Amendment or minimize the Second Amendment, then that gives them the ability to do that to the entire Constitution. And of which I think there's some things in our Constitution which weren't really ratified properly and are very unconstitutional. But that's another discussion for another day. So,
I would agree with that, and I would also say that the Second Amendment, from my point of view, just so I'm very clear on this, it's not to allow us to go hunting so much as it is to prevent the tyranny of the government we live under, which I would say right now that same government trying to take away guns is very much the tyrant that the Second Amendment exists to prevent.
well said, well said. And I definitely see that taking place, whether there's people in the government that's trying to fight against those that are trying to take away our rights and diminish them. But it just seems to be this ongoing struggle. We're definitely at a very pivotal point in history of our nation. I'm even questioning, whether or not there actually will be an election. That's another discussion for another day as well. But ultimately, what made you, aside from everything that you mentioned so far, what made you want to decide to run for president in 2024 as a Republican, when it seems like Trump is probably going to get the nomination? I don't see anything else happening. I'm just curious, what was your reasoning for deciding to take this bold move?
So it was actually only about a month to a month and a half ago. I was helping a friend that works with one of our charities to move out of Washington State, where there's a significant homeless problem, and she's got drug users and addicts, sleeping on her doorstep and that kind of thing. And I'd flown up to Washington, and it just hit me kind of in the middle of the night like a bag of bricks. I thought about who was actually running. We've got Trump, we've got Joe Biden, and we've got Ron DeSantis. I don't think that on the left, I don't think RFK Jr. actually has a chance, just because the Democratic Party does not practice democracy. They have delegates and super delegates, and so they're going to force through the candidate that they choose. Donald Trump, with the current pending felonies and those types of hurdles, even if it's absolute nonsense, and even if they're completely wrong in that persecution of Donald Trump, I think that they will move forward with it, and they'll force a felony on him at some point before the election. So I think they're going to take him out of play intentionally. And that really just leaves Ron DeSantis.
Does that actually prevent, like, if he gets a felony charge, does that prevent him from running for president? Because from what I understood is, if he even was found guilty on the indictments and even was in jail, that he could still technically serve in his capacity as president, which seemed very confusing.
So that's actually false. If he was found guilty of a felony, he would no longer be eligible to hold any elected office.
Okay. Okay. Well, then the next in line, DeSantis is running as a Republican. You can't forget Pence, or I guess we can forget Pence.
Yeah, I think everyone forgot Pence.
But he's still technically running. So how do you think that, have you held any political positions, any elected office prior to this run for presidential candidacy?
No, I haven't. But honestly, I consider that an asset. I think that pulling politicians or leaders from within our own government is a mistake. What we see overseas in parliaments in England and in France and Italy is that you have essentially a party that elects their prime minister or whoever's in charge as if they were our president. And then that party will have a vote of no confidence if the prime minister gets out of line with the party values. So that groupthink that happens in parties is really toxic, and it prevents actual progress. So although I'm running as a Republican, I'm doing it because that is realistically the only path to victory. I don't think that the third parties and the independents actually have a shot. So by running as a Republican against a Democrat, that's the only avenue of approach that I can see to attain the presidency. But once there, I'm not going to be for the Republican House and against the Democratic House. I am there to represent all Americans. And I think our Republican Party is especially weak these days, and I'm looking to bring it to where it is the party of Lincoln and not the party of Trump.
Okay. I like that. I like that. And I have a problem with party politics. I mean, it seems like a lot of issues are being weaponized. For the most part, it seems like even cryptocurrency, and I know we'll talk a little bit about blockchain and cryptocurrency with your campaign, but it even seems, you know, where you can, so it's a lot to take in when it comes to the entirety of the situation, where you have, in this sense, it feels like Democrats are anti-crypto and Republicans are pro-crypto, and they're kind of keeping that stance, whereas not working for the benefit of the people. And I've made a lot of statements. I would love to see changes in politics, because presidents, all your different congressmen, senators, they're all supposed to be public servants. And this is supposed to be a government that's supposed to be by, of, and for the people.
Yeah.
And we've gotten so far away from that. I mean, even the issue of states' rights is a very important thing, because we have things that are contradictory, like on a federal level, where something like cannabis is federally illegal,
Yep.
but yet in certain states it's lawful, legal. So you have things that are both illegal and legal at the same time, and it also prevents people from being able to, as far as in that industry, use the banking system, because the banking system's all federally regulated. And then you have all these lobbyists, and in order to get these congressmen and senators to do something on your behalf, you have to grease their wheels and give them money so that they, you know, and it's like, aren't you paid to do that? So there's so much corruption and so much it's hard to describe, like put in words, like my frustration when it comes to like what's happened to our government. And I'm an individual, I was telling you before we started recording, I'm the kind of person who doesn't have faith in the system. I don't see a reason for me personally to participate in the voting. It's the Electoral College that decides it. I was telling you about the Bush-Gore vote that took place back in the 2000s, I believe, or yeah, it was the 2000s. Or was it before that?
It was the year 2000.
Okay. So, I mean, it's been a while, and that situation was showing a lot of where we've lost the integrity, to me, of the voting system. And it's just shown more and more and more since that election. And I'm sure there were things prior to that as well. So I don't feel like my vote even matters, so I don't participate. How would you try to appeal to someone like myself, who is so disappointed with what has taken place with the federal government versus what America is supposed to be? And it seems like we're not even a republic anymore. It seems like we're just this mob rule democracy, and that wasn't what was written in the documents of our founding fathers, nor the Constitution.
So I would say that I am exactly your candidate, because I am just as disappointed in this government as you are, especially as somebody who served as a soldier in the United States Army for 16 years. And before that, I wasn't a privileged person in America. I was among the poorest, and I was homeless and, basically thrown aside by the system, even social services and things like that, while I was a child. So I have no love of the current government, but I most certainly love the American people. And the way I'm going to fix this right off the bat is, day one, I'm going to issue an emergency declaration and an executive order. With that executive order, I will be instructing the IRS to do a full forensic audit of all 535 members of Congress and the House and the Senate on both sides of the aisle. And I will be pushing for term limits. Now, term limits is something that we all know is going to be very hard to get term limits integrated, just because the people in office today do not want to vote for something that is going to work against them. So I have a bill I'll be putting forth that will grandfather in the current sitting House. I know it's not perfect, and we know that many of them are corrupt. However, they'll be grandfathered in so that they could stay until death. The next generation would be limited to 30 years. After that, 20 years, and after that, it would be 2 terms. So I look at that as basically a children prosper when old men plant seeds to trees they will never stand under the shade of, and that is how I'm looking at it for term limits. It's not the right thing for our generation, but it is the right thing for the next generation.
And it's really, to me, it's good to be forward thinking, because the problem I think that we've had with our nation personally is that we're pushing off all of our responsibilities to the future, and then the future generations have to take care of it. One of them being like the economic situation that we're dealing with now. Like Jerome Powell didn't. I'm not a big fan of the Federal Reserve or Jerome Powell, but he didn't create this problem that he's trying to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. So our entire financial system today is based around the concept that you have to sell your future to pay for your ability to live a good life today. You have to go and buy a mortgage. You're going to have 30 years of payments. You want to get a college education. You're going to have 30 to 60 years of payments. So the entire concept is backwards right now. And with blockchain, with what I've been working on the blockchain side of the house, I'll be putting forth a replacement for Social Security and Medicare, which uses a RES system, which is the Reaper economic system, in which basically you reap what you sow. So with that replacement for Social Security, which would be roughly $1.2 trillion per year of the wages, the national wage being about $8 trillion per year, with 15.3% going into Social Security. Currently, you don't get anything till you turn 65 or you have some other medical issues in your life. Once you do actually get money, it's going to be worth about 1/10 of what it would have been if it was just dropped in a money market or something else. And the whole time, the Congress and the House has been stealing money out of the back of the Social Security system, and it's going to run dry by 2038. So I would replace that where we'd be using that 1.2 trillion, where 50% goes towards your liabilities. So any debts that you have, so you would be able to allocate it yourself towards your mortgage, your student loans, your car note, whatever it is, based on how much you had previously put in. So if I had done 50% of the work that Mr. Rice had done during his lifetime, 50% as much contribution into the Social Security, then he's going to get twice as much liability relief out of that system as I am getting. The other 25% is going to be a passive earned income. So that is a capitalist American way of doing it, where you're getting a passive income based off what your contribution was to society in the past. And the remaining 25% is going to back federal loans, the VA loan, the FHA, healthcare, those types of loans that the government is already giving and the government's getting nothing back on. But because it would be in this system and it's the backing within the RES, those loans would be prioritized for their liability payments in the future. So now, simply by going to work and you're 20 years old, you start paying in a Social Security, you're now already earning a passive income, and you're also earning payments towards your liabilities. So that is a fair system that starts as soon as you enter it, and you always stand on the shoulders of the Americans that came before you. And as inflation goes up, so does the amount of total wages in the country, which is going to act even more so against the debts that you accumulated in the past when inflation was down. So it's an entirely fair, egalitarian system that I can replace our current debt slavery system with.
I like that. I like that. And I like the fact that you mentioned debt slavery. I don't think I've ever heard of a politician mention that. I would love to hear more politicians use that term, because that is 100% like what we have been put into. And I'm listening to the words that you're saying, and you're articulating yourself well. You seem to be very well versed on what's happening, the pulse of the nation. You look like a young guy. Are you even old enough to run for president?
So I am 34 today. I turned 35 in March, and you have to be 35 years old to be elected. So if I'm elected next year, that means I would be the youngest president in history. So I would be taking that title from JFK.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that beforehand, and I wanted to bring it up because I'm sure people are going to be looking at you and be like, this guy doesn't even look like he's old enough to technically run for office. What is he doing? So I wanted to kind of get that out of the way. And I wanted to move on to some of your policies, because as I was looking at the policies page and then coming back to the home page, you have some very interesting things that you'd like to do. So all these different topics and articles as such that are written are different things that you're proposing that you would like to do if elected president.
That's correct.
Okay. So the 28th Amendment proposal, without me opening that up, that is the most recent one, right?
That is.
What exactly is the 28th Amendment proposal that you're proposing in the proposal?
So the 28th Amendment proposal of the proposal. Sorry.
No, that was fun. It's fun to say proposal multiple times.
Yeah. So the 28th Amendment would be the right to financial freedom. So right now we have basically a threat of tyranny from a CBDC, where they're going to try to control what you buy. They're going to try to control how you behave. And they're going to use a central bank digital currency replacement for the US dollar to do so. This amendment would protect and prevent so that in the future, any abuses of the CBDC to control your behavior or your purchases would be in violation of the amendment. And hopefully at that point, going through the judiciary, the Supreme Court, they would be able to correct those wrongs. In addition to that, it would end civil asset forfeiture. It would end accredited investor discrimination, and it would make it so that you have the right to choose your form of currency and how you transact, whether that's gold, cash, credit, crypto. It's your money. It's your right to choose how you use it, and the government should not be forcing upon you any one form or another. I lost your audio for a minute.
I did mute myself for a second because I coughed. Thank you for mentioning that. So as I'm listening to you talk about the 28th Amendment proposal, I also see the Restricting CBDC Act. Is that, or just not, shouldn't have said act, but restricting, is that in combination, or are those two different things?
So the 28th Amendment would address that, but the best way for a CBDC to be introduced, and I do think it's inevitable, because we went from barter to bullion, from bullion to coinage, coinage to paper, paper to checks and digital and debit cards, and now we're in the age of cryptocurrency. And the reality is that regardless of anything Vivek Ramaswamy or Ron DeSantis is saying about how there won't be a CBDC if they are elected, yes, there will. There will be a digital dollar in our future. If there is not a digital dollar, then the digital yen and other nations that are embracing cryptocurrencies are going to move forward in the economy, while the United States takes a backseat for the next century. So it's going to come to pass. But I want to
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to ensure that as we introduce a digital dollar, it is not an act of tyranny, and that it preserves freedom and promotes an open economy rather than shutting down people and killing businesses and suppressing people's behavior and ability to purchase.
So kind of getting rid of the programmable currency, the programmability out of the programmable currency aspect of what most like the BIS, the IMF, what they want to see in the CBDCs, which gives them more control, because we're a lot of speculation, but it's more than speculation about it being connected to your digital ID, which we know is going to be introduced and coming. We also, there's talks of a social credit score, and a combination of the three, however you want to look at that programmable currency, is just digital prison. So since you mentioned it, now the Federal Reserve can't technically, from what I understand, they can't issue a CBDC. There would have to be some legislation that would go in place that would allow for them to do that. And then I've looked into, this wasn't something I meant to bring up, but I think it's relevant for the people that are into crypto. I've been looking into the private sector years ago when you had Brian Brooks, who was the chief legal officer at Coinbase, who also was part of One West Bank previous with Joseph Otting and Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin took the head of treasury position, put in Joseph Otting as the comptroller, and Brian Brooks was chief legal officer at Coinbase, helping to establish and develop USDC in partnership with Circle, which is backed by Goldman Sachs, which comes back to the Steve Mnuchin tie. Brian Brooks, before leaving Coinbase, was doing a lot of articles talking about the private sector should develop this. Then after he does, to me, his job, then he takes the comptroller position in Treasury. Joseph Otting gets a sideways move. They're all at the Treasury. And I'm curious if we'll see something like USDC potentially be the digital dollar, or if it will be government issued.
I think that USDC was the most likely to be brought on from outside of the government. By far, Tether is just a nightmare. So don't bother with that one. But
well, they're both working with like alphabet agencies, Department of Justice they're helping to seize funds. That's why I try to tell people it doesn't matter whether it's a digital dollar, a digital yuan, a USDC, USDT, or a CBDC. It's all programmable currency.
Exactly. So that's what we would be fixing with the 28th Amendment and restrictions of CBDCs is we would be preventing the ability of our government to program that money. We will keep the transparency. The transparency needs to stay. Otherwise, we won't know how to trust that the government hasn't minted, trillions more overnight. But we can absolutely handcuff the government so that it cannot use that currency against you.
I like that. No, I really do. I really do. You're also talking about combating trafficking and firing Gary Gensler. Are those two separate issues, or?
Oh, they're most certainly related. So this one,
I look at as our human capital is being trafficked in a lot of different ways. So I didn't know if there was any reference to that as us being securities and technically falling under the SEC for that reasoning.
So in this one, it's more specifically human trafficking in relation to sexual abuse and child trafficking. So in that one, I basically tied Gary Gensler very closely with multiple stages of abuse with Epstein Island and Hillary Clinton, and going back to his time at Goldman Sachs. So he's a very dirty little man, and I look forward to firing him.
Interesting. And maybe he'll be gone before then, hopefully. There was that little glimpse of hope. I think it was before the 4th of July weekend, where people were talking about him resigning because of an ongoing investigation, but didn't turn out to be truthful, unfortunately. So yeah, I'd love to see that. And you also mentioned a presidential pardon of both Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. I'm curious of what about Ross Ulbricht, and let's get on those three. I want to get, why isn't Ross Ulbricht on that list?
So first I'll address Ross Ulbricht. So because Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road, I do think that there had to be some knowledge in and of himself that what he was doing was going to get people hurt. He did allow for people to hire hitmen using Bitcoin as a service through the Silk Road. On top of drugs, and we're not just talking marijuana. There was some very hard things going on. Kilos of cocaine and heroin, black tar heroin. So I simply could not, in good conscience, say that Ross Ulbricht was doing that in a neutral, well-meaning manner. I think that he's served his time, and I think he can contribute to society at this point, but I don't think he deserves a presidential pardon.
Okay, let me pause you real quick because I maybe I should have corrected myself with this. What's going on is there's petitions and they're trying to bring attention to the case. There was potential talk of Trump doing this, but clemency would be the right term
Yeah.
because at under the age of 30 being arrested with the charges he was arrested, he has no possibility of being able to leave prison at this time. There is no possibility. And he was, as far as I know, there was 0 crimes committed. He had no criminal record prior to, and then they just threw the book at him. Now, I agree with some of the things that you said, but how do you feel about clemency if you said he served his sentence?
I do think that commuting his sentence could be an appropriate middle ground where it is not, calling him innocent. I don't think that innocent is the right term for Ross Albright, but I do think that he's at a point in life where he knows what he did was a big mistake, clearly, and it was wrong in many ways. And I think he could certainly move forward and be a contributor to society in the future. So I would commute his sentence, probably after having a very in-depth conversation with him.
Okay. No, and I appreciate that. And I know, like, these were things that we weren't planning on talking. So I like the fact that you're just kind of taking us on the fly and going with it and, and understanding where I'm coming from for this, because I feel as if like he's definitely has served his time. And I definitely feel like we need to see a pardon of Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. I don't look at Edward Snowden as being a traitor, and I look at Julian Assange as being someone who is a journalist who should have the right to be able to get this information out to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I view both men under the Whistleblower Protections Act. And from that stance, I think it's a humiliation that none of our former, all the way back to Obama, none of them pardoned Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. And I think that's a travesty.
It was talks on the Trump end. I don't know what happened, but there was talks. So I saw there was a lot more topics, and I definitely encourage people, if they're interested in the things that you're talking about, to check out your website. I've thrown up the link, and it's going to be in the video description, patrickforpresident.com. You can also follow Patrick over on the Twitters, and you can find him at PLR_2024, and I'll share that more towards the end of the video. I encourage people to go through the policies and read them in depth, especially, again, if you're interested in supporting what Patrick is doing. I'm curious about the Data Ownership Act. And since I mentioned cannabis, I am a cannabis user. And I believe that both, I can't say all hallucinogens necessarily, because there's some that are made artificially, but natural hallucinogens and things like that, I could see people benefiting from the legalization. I mean, we've already seen psilocybin kind of specifically being legalized in portions of Colorado. And a lot of psychologists are talking about the benefits of microdosing and things to that effect. And anything obviously used in excess can be a problem for anybody. But I'd like to cover the Data Ownership Act, what you're proposing with that, and then kind of dive into the cannabis and hallucinogen legalization.
Sure. So for the Data Ownership Act, what I'm proposing is that the big government companies, I said government, technically big tech companies like Facebook that actually belong to big government, they are harvesting your data and they are selling it at massive profits, right? So I'm sure many people have heard that, Facebook doesn't sell anything and it's worth so much. Well, it's because you're the product.
Right.
Because you are producing that product, that data, you should own it. And because you own it, for them to use it and sell it, they should be licensing that data from you and they should be paying you for it. So with the Data Ownership Act, they would be required to give you annual reports and they would be required to send you a transfer of funds for no less than 25% of the value that they brought in selling your data.
I like that. I like that. I mean, we should be able to control our data and choose what is allowed to be utilized. But again, if you're using a service that's free, you are the product. And it's pretty much like that with everything. And people don't realize, like, data has become the new oil. It's it's the richest resource that we have. I mean, I think it's what most nations and most entities are seeking with the growth of AI. It's, you know, that's going to become even more prominent. So it's a lot to take in. What's going on with the cannabis and the hallucinogens?
So I am very against the war on drugs that has put many fathers and mothers and, you know, sons, daughters, siblings in prison that realistically they had no victim. It's a victimless crime, and I'm against any kind of impersonation based on victimless crimes. But how do we actually fix that and fix the war on drugs? And this really ties into the border and the problems south of our southern border. And it comes down to the fact that we have lost the war on drugs, and we need to legalize all natural substances as well as hard drugs. We need to legalize microdosing of cocaine, microdosing of heroin, even those things that I would never take myself. The reason we have to do it is because if we want to have any hope of shutting down those supply chains, we have to know that the people who are using have another option, so that they have a realistic expectation that they can turn in a dealer that has given them large quantities. So if we make it so a heroin user can go and buy a microdose packet of heroin just as easy as they buy cigarettes, then what is their incentive to protect a dealer if it's only illegal for them to not expose their source, but it's completely legal for them to go to the gas station down the street and pick up what they need in the time being? So I'm very big on personal responsibility, and you know, in many ways I could be a libertarian candidate. I just don't think they can win.
You sound very libertarian, by the way.
I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment. But in that regards, I think we need to legalize across the board, and through that we can actually attack the true issue of drugs, which is largely what causes our issues at the border. As great as a wall is, and having a barrier to create a border is obviously important, the immigrants that are coming up are largely forced up by our three-letter agencies who have interfered in Central and South America over the last 100 years by supporting almost a dozen different coups d'etats and by supporting multiple drug trafficking agencies. So the best way to fight those drugs and fight those three-letter agencies that are poisoning our own country is to take away their power by legalizing.
Okay. No, I like that. And I mean, I think too, like we're seeing like an increase of the fentanyl being put in pretty much a lot of like street drugs, except for cannabis. I mean, I haven't heard any fentanyl cannabis situations, but I've heard of people thinking that they were doing cocaine and it was either fentanyl or laced with fentanyl. Same thing with heroin. So if you legalized it and there were competition of people to be able to put out stuff, I think we would be reducing, you know, people would be able to get their supply safer. And I think things like that are a lot more important. And I'm also one of these people who feels like if there's no victim, there should be no crime. So if someone wants to use these drugs, they should be able to, as long as they're not causing harm to other people. I mean, they may be causing harm to themselves, but it's self-chosen. And I think that, you know, as that goes into responsibility. So it just goes into like, you know, who you are as an individual. So I completely agree with what you're saying. A few things that I wanted to ask you before we wrap things up. I wanted to get your stance on, I mean, obviously you're pro crypto and pro blockchain, anti CBDC, which I love, or I should say anti-programmable currency. What are your thoughts on cryptocurrency and blockchain as a presidential candidate, and how would you try to better the whole entire industry for the United States, and how would you utilize these technologies potentially in government capacities?
So I definitely want to take the chains off of innovation of blockchain. So sorry for that pun.
Take the chains off the blockchain, so it's just a bunch of blocks.
Yeah, exactly. So we build things with it.
like
So
Legos.
yeah, exactly. So really, with blockchain, we can fix so many different government spending issues. I do want to go after blockchain voting. I think that voting on the blockchain answers concerns both for the election integrity of the right, but also for voter suppression of the left. So, not only should election day be a national holiday, but if you were able to do so from your phone and have absolute confidence that that vote was not only counted but legitimate, that would be the ideal situation for voting in the United States. I'm also going to try to integrate blockchain into things like the post office. If we change every home address into a blockchain address, we can make it so that the resident of that address can now go and manage a wallet relative to that blockchain address. And they can say, okay, well, if you want to send mail here that I haven't pre-approved with a signature from my wallet, it's going to cost you 10 cents or it's going to cost you $1,000. And now suddenly you're no longer getting 100 different promotions for credit cards you never asked for and all kinds of junk mail. It's kind of a personal pet peeve of mine, to be honest, because I hate junk mail. But
No, me too. That's pretty much all I get.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't give up my real address to people, so I just it's just a bunch of junk, except for utilities.
And then as far as digital ID, that's also something that's just kind of inevitable, but it doesn't have to be tyranny. So I'm proposing a digital ID that would effectively be a biometric NFT ID using your iris, your thumbprint, your facial recognition, and your KYC data. You would create your own wallet address. And with that wallet address, it would be able to hold NFTs. Those NFTs can be things like your driver's license, like the deed to your home, basically all your vital records. And those NFTs can also have the ability to do something like vote. So you would be able to hold your voter registration card that says, okay, Mr. Rice can vote in District 11 in the state of Texas because this is his resident address. Because it's just a wallet address on the face of it, there is absolute privacy and nobody can see what's in there. They can't see your home address, they can't see your data, but you know that it is secure and you know exactly what happens with your votes. And you can also go and verify, okay, this vote belonged to a real person.
Some of the benefits that I'd see with a digital ID is like where we could just expose the information that's needed for the whatever the situation might be. Like if I'm buying alcohol and they need proof of age, all I need to do is show my birth date. Like they don't need to know my address and all this other stuff because that causes a lot of issues. So I like that. You said scanning eyeballs. Did you mention like eyeball retina scans?
Yep. So your pupil, your iris, along with your facial recognition and your thumbprint. And so I do have this as a policy actually on my my website. If you wanted to go to policies under blockchain, and I'll show you what it's not as scary.
Yeah, because I'm not a huge fan of eyeball scans, facial recognition. It sounds like we're getting into some gray areas, sir.
Yep. So scroll down a little bit, a little more. Okay. Right there.
Blockchain voting.
One up. Vital records vaults.
Okay.
So there's a photo here that explains what I'm talking about. So above on the top, you see the VIN to a car. And the VIN to a car says what country it was manufactured in, what plant. It's going to tell you the destination, the what motor, how many doors is on it, all that kind of stuff, right? So by mixing those four factors below it, each one of those would, when you set up your wallet yourself on your phone, it would be able to recognize it over and over and over again to create a 256 hash for each of those items. And then with the modifier, they combine to create your wallet address. So the reason for that is that with mass adoption of blockchain, we're not going to be able to ask little old ladies to maintain the 24 catchphrase key
The recovery phrase and all that. Yeah.
So by doing it this way, we would basically protect it so that it is always that individual. No one can copy or steal that wallet address without being that individual. And on top of that, you can't lose your keys, and it's always going to be there.
Now, would this be like a way that we would own the ownership of this information, where it's not where our facial recognition and eyeball scan information can get out to the public?
Exactly. Completely self-sovereign ID. You have control, and for anyone else to see what's in your wallet, you have to grant them access through your wallet.
So is it I mean, aside from some of the other features that you're talking about, it sounds very similar to like what has been proposed with like decentralized ID, the DIDs.
Yeah, very similar. But really, this is more about the ability to hold vital records within the wallet.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, again, I appreciate you taking time to explain it, because as soon as you started talking about scanning eyeballs, I was like,
yeah,
why am I doing this interview? But now it makes sense what you're explaining, and I do appreciate you taking the time to like make sure that you're alleviating those kind of concerns that I'm having here.
Well, and I appreciate you not running away from it. So I've actually talked to a few secretaries of states in different areas of the country about integrating this, and specifically the red states are big fans of it, because there are people with legitimate fears that there's a mark of the beast, and that there could be something where digital ID, where there's an implant in the hand, or there's something, a tattoo, something of that nature. And this is completely non-invasive. And that's what they really like about it the most for their states, is that you don't have to install anything in your body. You are still your self-sovereign person, and you own your data.
Okay. I like that. The other thing I saw was blockchain voting, and I do want to bring you back on for a conversation to talk about what you do outside of the political spectrum, like what you're doing in the crypto space as the CEO of Reaper Financial. But Tiara had told me that there's some blockchain voting set up via that platform, from what I understand. So what is your experience with blockchain voting, and how do you feel very confident in what you're proposing here?
Yep. So in my company that I founded, we've done over 50 individual blockchain votes with 0 errors of any kind. So we're able to read the balance of somebody's token that they are holding, of the tokens from our company. And based on that, they get a vote of the amount. So 1 token equals 1 vote. And we've done that absolutely flawlessly for about 1.5 years now. If we were to add in that ID I was just talking about, we'd be able to integrate the same system into elections, and we will have the most secure elections that we've ever had.
Whatever have you, since you, I mean, obviously I would think that you've looked into this, whatever came of the patent from the post office when it came to blockchain based voting?
So they have the patent, but the patent is very specific. It's to specific chains with specific mechanisms. There are plenty of ways to work outside of that patent to bring things forth. But either way, if it's the government's system, as this would be, as I'm proposing, I'm sure they're more than willing to work around that patent.
Okay. I was just curious about that. And the one of the other things, I didn't know if you would know the answer to this, but you had mentioned that you didn't think that RFK Jr. would get the Democratic nomination. And let's say, for example, you don't get the Republican nomination. Can you and RFK Jr. switch parties, run independent, anything to that effect, if you lose the nomination from the party?
We could do so in roughly January if we chose to do so. I do think RFK could do it and be a spoiler, honestly. I hate that term because I don't think anyone's vote is a spoiler. If you support somebody more than somebody else, vote for them. For myself, I don't think I would necessarily have a lot of support as an independent. I would much prefer to stay on the Republican ticket. I am very conservative at heart as far as many of my values, the family unit, and from that side of things. But yeah, if RFK does not receive their nomination, and I don't think that he will, mainly because of the delegates and super delegates in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not practice democracy. I'm hoping that he finds another ticket because I think he has broad popular support. There's a possibility that would be my ticket, though I don't like his stance on guns.
I don't like his stance on guns. I don't like his stance on taxes. There's a few things that I don't really like his stances on.
Yeah, I agree with him on a lot, but there's definitely some things where we would butt heads. So,
okay, cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. One more question before I give you a chance to do final thoughts. If Trump is not found guilty and given a felony or anything that's going to prevent him to run for president, where is Patrick going to be standing when it comes to that? Do you even support Donald Trump?
So I voted for him the last 2 times. However, I'll say this: even if he wins, he loses. The reason Donald Trump was elected originally was because he said he would put Hillary Clinton in jail. People wanted to see the corruption stamped out. They wanted to see justice and those who were guilty prosecuted. We didn't see that happen, despite some of the theories out there. We don't know that it happened. And ultimately, he presided over the United States during the greatest period of tyranny during living memory, where he pushed a treatment protocol on stage with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, and he also pushed for a vaccine which has murdered Americans.
What was that operation? What they call that? Warp speed, yeah. Operation Warp Speed.
So, although I will support him over Biden without question, do I support him individually at this moment in time from his record? I think his record is pretty poor. And I think that if he does win re-election, if he does beat Biden this time, which I do think the election was rigged in 2020, to be clear, but I also think that's partially his fault. He said it would be since 2018.
So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly, right?
He manifested it, basically.
Yeah. So if he manages to get back in the White House, what will really happen? Well, he's already limited to 4 years. That's 4 years where he's going to be impeached again at least 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 times by the Democrats. Not that it's justified, but they'll do it anyways. And during that time, we have to wonder, will we see any of the results that we're looking for? Will we see anybody held to account? Will we see justice? It's already been 7, 8 years since he was elected the first time, and I haven't seen the justice that I was expecting or wanting or that I voted for. So frankly, I'm not sure he can get the job done. And unfortunately, the pendulum usually swings. And after his 4 years, what will we have to show for it? Probably a President Michelle Obama or a President AOC if he wins the next 4 years. So I'm not terribly excited about that aspect.
I'm still wondering if we're going to see Michelle Obama make an announcement because there's, aside from this RFK Jr., there's no real strong candidates. No, I don't think anybody really wants to see Biden serve as president again. It doesn't make
he has any popular support at all, not even from his own party. But
he's just too old. He's just too old, and it makes things look bad. It was making me think if I can't do a Donald Trump impression. If I could, I would. But if Donald Trump was to reach out to you and say, Patrick, I want you to be my vice president. I want you to run with me. Would you accept that?
Yes, I would. I would accept Donald Trump's vice presidency. I'm a hell of a lot better than Pence.
Well, because he's going to be choosing somebody, and I don't think it would be DeSantis. I think that the lines have been drawn there when it comes to the two of them. I think if they could have found some kind of common ground and worked together, I think that it would have been very powerful. But
I do want to be clear on DeSantis. He's as deep state as they come. So, and I'll back that up with facts any day of the week. So,
Well, he did allow for, from what I understand, and I don't want to. We've talked about some things that I think are okay for the YouTube algorithm, but the genetically modified mosquitoes, I believe he allowed for those to be released in Florida, which now there's speculation of now. Well, not speculation, but there are some reported cases of return of malaria, and some people are thinking that there's going to be correlation between the two, because prior to these genetically modified mosquitoes, there wasn't any malaria in not only Florida, but also Texas.
Yeah. Well, I'll quote Robert Franklin Kennedy Jr.'s uncle and say that the very word secrecy is repugnant to a free and open society. Ron DeSantis is a member of St. Elmo's Secret Society out of Yale, which is adjacent to the Skull and Bones, which is what all three of the Bushes were: Bush Jr., Herbert Walker Bush, and Prescott Bush.
It's really called St. Elmo's, though?
It's called St. Elmo's. And realistically, the Skull and Bones is very much a secret society that does not have the best interests of the United States at heart. And it goes straight back to ties to the original founding of the Nazi Party. In fact, the Nazi Party used the Skull and Bones for the emblem on the SS officer's cap. So in that regard, to say DeSantis is anything but a deep state
a plant
is a little bit ridiculous to me. I think that once people just take a finger deep look at who he really is, it's going to be pretty obvious.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. And I really wasn't planning on the interview going this long, but I felt like it actually needed it after we were talking. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I'd like to see what's going to happen with your campaign, pay attention to it. If you make any progress, I'd like to bring you back on, just to bring more attention to what you're doing. Before we do wrap up, is there anything that we didn't talk about, or any final thoughts, anything that you want to leave for the viewers, especially the people in America that are going to be voting for a president, that are sick and tired of being sick and tired of the choices that we've been given and want something new? What would you say to those people in your final thoughts?
So the final thing I'd want to address that I don't think we got to go over was my military background as a combat medic for 16 years. And I just want to remind the American people that during my lifetime, and during most Americans' lifetimes, we haven't won a war. And that's a very sobering thought when you consider that we're spending $800 billion on our defense budget. So we very desperately need a person who actually understands the military to come in as commander-in-chief so that we can fix it, and so that we can actually see some return on investment, so that our greatest Americans, and I'm not including myself in that, our service members who are giving their lives and have given their lives need to be honored. And today we are not honoring them with these politicians in office.
I agree, man. And I appreciate you saying all that. I appreciate you, taking the time to do this, because and don't take this the wrong way by any means. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but it seems like you're going against like a losing uphill battle. So I want to do everything I can to try to, and please don't take that the wrong way. I mean, you're new in politics. You've never run in office. I've never heard of you until this foray. I heard something about a week ago or two when you announced it, because I believe there was a couple crypto channels talking about it. So I appreciate you taking a stand. I mean, it's good to see people caring about our country to actually want to do something about it. I've thought about the political game, and I'm also trying to educate people about agorism, which kind of goes into some of the things that you said, because like when you're talking about allowing people to use the currency of their choice and things like that, agorism is using counter economics, parallel marketplaces, and things to that effect. And I think that the more that we have things like that, the more that we can support each other and keep ourselves around like-minded people. And so I do like some of the things you're talking about, and I would definitely like to explore some more policies that you're going to be working towards in the future as well, depending on the progress of this. So I I do appreciate your time. Was there anything else that you wanted to add? And I appreciate you talking about the military experience. I want to give you a chance though. Like for someone watching this again, what would you say to convince them to vote for you? What would you do to convince the Republican Party to nominate you as their presidential candidate in 2024, along with the people voting for you?
So I would say that right now, as our country stands, we all know we have some significant problems, and we know that we are going in the wrong direction. That includes Trump, and it includes Biden, and it includes the way the pendulum has been swinging for many years. I am not them. I am an American, and I am not a politician. I am just here because you need me. And I know that a lot of Americans have prayed for the military to save this country. They've prayed to save the children from human trafficking. And those are all prayers that they're putting behind false idols. I am not an idol. I'm just an American, but I know what you want. And I'm here to give it to you.
Well said. Well said. Well, I'm going to have links down below for your Twitter account so people can follow you over on Twitter. And again, just trying to navigate through the screens here. We have PLR_2024. And again, this will be linked down below in the video description, as well as patrickforpresident.com, where you can review his policies, his biography, the press room, coming events, if you want to join a team. And if you would like to support and contribute and donate to his campaign, there's information on how you can do that at patrickforpresident.com. So again, man, I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. Keep me up to date with what's happening. And either way, I would like to be able to bring you back on for a future episode and talk about what Reaper Financial is. I know you're trying to keep the two separated, and I appreciate you doing that, because it would be a really good opportunity for you to shill what you're doing on the other side. So I respect the fact that you're not, but I do want to give you the invitation to come back on and talk about it specifically. So,
all right. Well, thank you, Mr. Rice.
No problem. Bear with me 1 second. Just going to do the wrap up. So again, we're going to have links down below for everything that we talk about on today's show. If you guys haven't smashed that like button, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed here at Rice TVX. If you think you're subscribed, make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube has been unsubscribing a lot of people. And with that being said, make sure you follow me over on Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute. Links are down below, and you can also find them at ricetvx.com. And before we wrap up, I encourage you, as always, to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch that you want to see in the matrix. Be the change that you want to see in the world. And until next time, practice change. Take time to visit my website at ricetvx.com. There you can sign up for my mailing list so you can stay up to date on all things Rice. Once you've signed up for my mailing list, you will find links for my channels and socials towards the top of the website. Make sure you are subscribed to both my YouTube channels, Rice Against the Grain and Rice TVX. If you want to support my work directly, as well as get early access, exclusive content for both channels, plus more, join my Patreon.